Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. This is episode 68 of the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum. I'm your host for this episode. And today we're going to be talking to Chris Talbot. Chris not only serves as the youth and family ministry leader at his church, he's also the youth and family ministry program coordinator and the campus pastor at Welch College. And he's also written a book called Remodeling Youth Ministry. So today we're going to talk to him all about his ministry, how he got to where he is today. Of course, we're also going to talk about what it's like to be a youth ministry professor, what it's like to have written a book about youth ministry, and all the different, maybe the highlights that we can learn from his book. Chris has a ton to share with you today, and it's going to be a great conversation. So hope you continue to listen in. While you're at it, if you have not done so yet, please drop us a like or a positive review on the podcast app or the service that you use. That just helps us out a ton, especially if you're using Apple Podcasts. That's a great way for us to just kind of be known and be found by other ministry leaders out there if you like it, and if you subscribe, and if you leave us a positive review. Also, if you've not done so yet, please follow us on social media. We are at StuMinPod, that's StuMinPod on Twitter, and at the Student Ministry Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. That's another great way for you to connect with us online. And if you haven't done so yet, please share this podcast with others. We are so grateful for you to keep coming back time after time to just listen to these amazing stories of what God is doing in the lives of other youth workers. So thank you so much for that. But before we continue with this conversation with Chris Talbot, we do want to thank our sponsors for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. They are amazing, and I want you to hear about them. So here we go. Our first sponsor is G-Shades. It's a youth ministry curriculum and teaching strategy focused on helping students see everyday life situations through the lens of the gospel. G-Shades has options to fit everybody. With 3 plans to choose from, this curriculum gives you the resources that you need to do what you want to do better. Do you simply need message outlines, discussion guides, and games? That's just $16 a month. If you're looking for higher production value, including bumper videos, Instagram devotionals, and parent guides, that's $25 a month. And do you want an affordable youth ministry video curriculum that will help you increase your online reach during the pandemic? G-Shades has you covered for only $36 a month. You will not find youth ministry video curriculum at that price anywhere else. G-Shades does an excellent job of not just teaching students the typical things that we teach them in youth group, but allowing them to see every life situation that they go through the lens of the gospel. G-Shades creator Mike Haynes has actually been on the podcast for episodes 32 and 55. So if you'd like to learn more about Mike, you can check out both of those episodes. You can also head over to gshades.org. That's GSHADES.org to download season 2 of G-Shades Youth Ministry Curriculum. And be sure to use the promo code TSMPOD. That's for the Student Ministry Podcast. That's TSMPOD at your checkout to receive $5 off your order. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. Our other sponsor is MinHub Youth, which was actually developed by a fellow youth pastor. MinHub Youth helps you store and track your student, staff, and parent info, as well as attendance for your events. There are a ton of features, but this week I want to tell you about RSVPs. Once you add events to your database, you can optionally sign students up for those events with yes, no, or maybe responses. Each response also has a spot for notes. So if you ask a student if they can make it and they say maybe, you can log their reason in and check back with them when the event gets closer. Also, each RSVP category can be used to message all those students or generate reports. On its own, the app is only $5 on iOS or Android, and you can use it forever on that one device without ever paying any more. But if you want to sync your database across multiple devices or with your leaders, you can sign up for MinHub Sync service and support the Student Ministry Podcast by visiting minhubsync.com/SMP for Student Ministry Podcast. That's MINHUB sync.com/SMP. You can find the links to both G Shades and MinHub in our podcast show notes. Thank you so much to G Shades and MinHub for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Now it's time to get into this conversation with Chris Talbot. Well, hi, Chris. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, we're just kind of starting this up. I had not met you before all this and everything, but we connected on Twitter, and I'm so great that you reached out and everything. I'm excited to get into this conversation today. As I was telling you a little bit offline, that this is the first time I think we've talked to someone that is not only an author but also a youth ministry professor, and so involved in training the next generation of youth workers. So I'm really excited to get into that. But I'd love for people just to hear your story at the beginning. Like, how did God bring you to this point where you are in your life? How has He worked in your ministry over the years to bring you to this point?
To go all the way back, I grew up in I would call it like a nominally Christian household. I think if you took a snapshot of my family, when I was a teenager, even a preteen, asked my parents like if they were Christians, they probably would have said yes. But we really went to church pretty flippantly. It was a little bit more than like Christian Easter only, but but not much more than that. Like we would go like once a month or something like that. And I remember I got asked by a friend to go to a youth event. So I grew up in Southeast Michigan, and there was like this fun house event center that they invited me to go to, and I was like, man, I'd love to go. So just had a friend invite me to go this fun event, and I was in the van and I was with their youth group, and we were like on the way, and he said, oh, by the way, like we're gonna have a service like beforehand. I was like, man, it's like a total bait and switch,
Yeah.
So I was like a little frustrated, like in the van, like on the way, but I was like, whatever, like I know we're gonna have fun. I think it was a lock-in at this event center. And so then we go to the service, we go to this church, and I don't even remember the name of the person that spoke. I don't even remember like the passage that was read. All that I remember is that the speaker gave just the clearest gospel presentation that I had ever heard. And just in that moment, like realizing, I think I was maybe 13, 14 years old, like the weight of my own sin, my need for a savior, the depth of God's love for me. And I'm sure I had heard things like that before, like in my church experience, from other people and whatnot. But it was really like the first time it all clicked for me, and it just all kind of fell together. And from that point on, really, like I just felt kind of this growing zeal within me to just be part of like a local body of believers, part of the church, to really try to live out my faith as strong as I possibly could. And obviously, like in your teenage years, it's ups and downs. Church camp,
Sure.
and things like that. But I really just felt like real passionate about this kind of newfound faith that really had just clicked for me. I started attending this church that my friend invited me to, and it became my home church. The church probably never grew more than like 100 people, even now. But our youth group at one point was like 30 students out of that 100 people. So it was like it's really dynamic.
Wow. Yeah.
Youth group, and it was led by this lady named Lynn Isaacs, who was our youth leader, and I just a sweet lady. Anytime I go back home, I go and visit her. But I think she was in like her late 50s, early 60s at that time, and just like couldn't tell you like any of the popular musicians or anything like that, but just loved the mess out of us. Like she cared for us, was just so compassionate, loving, and gave me opportunities to like exhibit my gifts like within our youth group and all that. And so I think a large part of it is just that, like growing up and having just such a good experience in youth group, having a youth leader that really just not only said that she loved me and like cultivated that type of love, but like kind of lived it out really faithfully as well. So then I decided that I was going to go to college for ministry. I didn't really know what that looked like, so I packed up all my stuff and I drove. Started going to college at Welch College, where I now teach. I was there. I finished a 4-year degree in like 5.5 years. So it took me a little bit longer. I was working full time, like near the end there.
Okay.
And then upon graduating, I just I I spoke at a few like Christian camps like near the end before graduating, and just really started to feel like this deep desire to like minister specifically to teenagers. That wasn't necessarily on my mind throughout college. I knew that I wanted to do ministry, that the Lord was leading me towards ministry in some way, but I didn't know what that looked like. But yeah, upon graduating, I really felt this draw towards ministering to students. So I worked for a short time at a church in Muscle Shoals, Alabama,
Okay.
for a few years out in Greenville, North Carolina. And then, since moving back to the Nashville area, I've been youth and family pastor at a church in the in the Sylvan Park neighborhood, which is like right in the middle of Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
So a little bit of geographical,
Yeah.
variety there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I love hearing your story. Like, there's so many of the people that I've talked to in this podcast that their story includes someone that connected with them when they were a teenager, and it's changed their life, and they wanted to do that for other people as well. It's amazing to know how God can use our influence on that, and I'm sure with you being a professor, I'm guessing you probably hear that story from a lot of your students that the reason they're there is because someone made an impact on them when they were in that point, and they want to do that for others.
Yeah. I would say almost without fail, when new students come into my program, I ask them, I said, what has led you to youth ministry? And almost always, if not every single time, I've heard them say, I had just a really great youth pastor, and I want to do that same thing for like the next generation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So let's talk about your ministry a little bit. You have different things that you're involved in with your ministry, with the church aspect, but also, yeah, teaching and training other youth workers and other students. But then you've written a book about youth ministry. So let's first talk about your ministry there at the church, youth and family. What's that look like on a regular basis? What do you lead? And what's the ministry look like?
Yeah, so my title is youth and family pastor at a church called Sylvan Park Church in Nashville here. Um, I I would say it looks different from previous ministry opportunities that I've had. So when we were out in Eastern North Carolina, the church I worked at there was probably it's a little more fluent, like upper middle class, really terrific kids, but their biblical literacy was like at a higher level. A lot of kids in like Christian schools and whatnot. I would say the majority of kids that we interact with and that come through our youth ministry at Sylvan Park um, are from low economic statuses. Virtually none of them have Christian parents, and so we're going to pick them up and like bring them to church and whatnot. So there's kind of a different focus and different emphasis there, like in our ministry here, than it was maybe in previous places.
Okay. Okay. That's cool. And then, so you're not only doing ministry, you're also teaching it. So what's it like to be, I think, yeah, you said you've been doing this for 7 years. Is that correct? Yeah. So what's it like to be a professor of youth ministry and other Bible classes and things like that? Other than the classes and things like that you teach, what's that like on a regular basis? Because I think, like, we in youth ministry, we have, the seventh grade boy that all of a sudden, realizes, oh, you work at the church, and they're like, so what do you do all week? And so I guess that's kind of my way of asking that same question. It's like, what's a youth ministry professor do? Like, what's your regular job? What's that ministry look like?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't want to hype it up too much, but it's really been like my dream job. And I don't think I knew that it was something that I was going to enjoy as much as I do. But I get to come to work every day, and I get to teach classes about youth ministry. And, anything from like a class on philosophy of youth and family ministry to apologetics, classes on teaching, organizing like programs in your church and stuff like that. So it's just a blast. So I'm over our program of youth and family ministry. So that means I teach our youth ministry classes, but I also advise our students that are in that program as well. So I get to do a lot of like one-on-one mentoring with them as well, talk to them like in and outside of class. On top of stuff with the program, teaching the classes, advising students, I also get to teach some like Bible and theology classes here as well. And I also get to serve as the campus pastor on campus as well. So all the time, I'm just having a blast, like interacting with students, getting to talk to them about spiritual things, about ministry, about what the Lord's doing in their life. So yeah, it's just it's a blast all the time. I imagine I'm always assuming at some point someone's going to like pull back the curtain and be like, all right, you can't do this anymore. But at this point, like they haven't yet. So it's been good. And I really enjoyed a lot.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So yeah, you have a book. You're a published author, Remodeling Youth Ministry. So of course, we're going to get into the book and talk about like what the contents are and everything, but I'd love to know like who is the intended audience of this book? Who did you write it to?
Yeah. I dedicate the book to my youth ministry students. And I think as I was writing it, I had them mainly in mind. And so I generally have students training to be in youth ministry, or people that are in like their first few years of ministry. So I would say one of the main goals of the book is to help someone develop, with a lot of freedom here, but help them develop a philosophy of youth and family ministry. So like, what are like the important things for you as you're getting ready to get into your first youth ministry job? Like, what are those non-negotiables? What are the things that you want to like keep really central to your focus there?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know in the book, you say that there's a lot of different models of youth ministry that are out there. I'm sure you've probably experimented with a ton of different models over your years in ministry. I know I have. I feel like sometimes that model is even changing year to year. Sometimes it's month to month, especially during this pandemic, kind of relearning how to do youth ministry. So I know your goal for the book, it seems, is to really go deeper and have that biblical foundation for youth ministry. So if you could, I know we want people to actually read the book. So we're not going to give the whole book right now, but what are a couple of those foundations that you've been able to gather from the Bible for youth ministry?
Yeah. Oh man, that's such a good question. In my experience, just like you were mentioning, was you get all of these different like emphases, right? Like you have family-driven youth ministry and Jesus-centered youth ministry, and like 5 views on youth ministry that, I mean, that kind of illustrates the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just found myself, like, as I was interacting with um, all these different models, is all of them have something good to say. Like, there's hardly a one where I'm like that's not good, right? Like they all have really good contributions, and so trying to like synthesize that together into something that is still like biblically based. I think I mentioned in the book my philosophy for a long time, if I'm trying to boil it down to like bare bones, is to be biblically saturated, gospel driven, and to minister relationally. Which doesn't, I don't think that's novel like at all. I think that's kind of what we all want to do, but trying to keep those like front and center. So I tell my students all the time, like, I hope my desire, I don't know if this is the case, but my desire is, if you came to my youth ministry and like you're able to like kind of cut it down the side, that like looking at a cross section of it, it just like bled Bible. Like it's so saturated with scripture that like that's what it's built upon. That's what's running through the veins of the ministry. Like that's what's kind of forming everything. But that it's being driven by the gospel, right? Like the end goal, the purpose of it all is not only to get kids saved, right, for them to know the gospel, but also to live deeper in light of the gospel as well, to define the depth of the gospel, to realize the goodness of God, the love of God in their life. And I think one major way to do that is just to minister relationally, right? Like have embodied, like compassionate relationships with people. And I think any youth minister that's been in youth ministry for any amount of time can tell you, a bunch of different stories about those hard to reach students that are going through some really difficult situations. And it's been those kind words or those one-on-one interactions that really like made a major difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that I've learned, especially over this last year, I think there are things that I knew, but the pandemic has allowed me, and I think a lot of people, to clear our minds and refocus and reprioritize ministry. And those are some of the principles that I feel like I've come back to as well. But I guess through your own experience and as you help train other youth workers, how do you actually like practically do that when there are so many things pulling you in different directions and different models out there, like I said, but also like how to keep that weekly or sometimes twice a week program running. And at the same time, you're like, I know I need to be focused on the Bible, and I know I need to be focused on relating to kids and just like actually like discipling them and connecting with them. But there's so many other things that are demanding for your time. Issues pop up, stuff like that are like, if I could just focus on sharing the gospel and loving students, it'd be a lot easier. So like, how does one actually like stay focused on those foundations in the middle of all that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because it's so easy to have like ministry, like ADD, right? Like because there's so many different things out there that are like calling for attention. We get emails and phone calls that say like, "Hey, we would love to help you like grow your ministry. Here's like a 5 easy step program or
Right.
whatever whatever it is, right?" Um, One of the things that's helped me, and I think it's helpful for others as well, is simply writing out their philosophy of
Mm.
ministry. I don't even know what drove me to do this. I don't think I had a class. Maybe I did and I didn't do it. But in my first year of ministry, I think in the first month I was there, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to write out like what I think is really like central to doing ministry faithfully according to scripture, that's driven by the gospel and so on. And so I wrote it out. And then I don't know if it's like, being young and ambitious, but like I give it to my volunteers as well. It's like, hey, read this, like give me some feedback on it. Because one of the things I ran into really quickly was I had really well-intentioned volunteers, but they'd be like idea machines as well, and so they'd throw ideas to me, and I'd have ideas, and all of a sudden, like if we don't have any like rubric at
Mm.
all of a sudden like we're doing everything right,
Mm.
but at the same time we're not able to do anything. And so I think having something that I could point to, not only for my volunteers but even for myself, to say, hey, like this so good, like this is a really good idea, but does it fit with our particular mission?
Mm.
Like does it fit with what we're trying to do? And so that was really helpful, like being able to just point to like this actual like document. And there's nothing like inerrant about that document, right? Like I'm fallible.
Right.
I'm full of errors, but be able to point to that and say, hey, like does this fit like with our mission? And we might even have some back and forth about it. Like they might think it is, maybe I don't think it is, but having that conversation about
Yeah.
looking through it is really healthy as well.
That's awesome. I know we were talking also offline just about even confrontation and things like that. And I think that's something that I've been kind of taking another step in, a new step in over the last several years as well. And that I think that's so important, as my wife and I were even just talking this week about, yeah, having that rubric, like you said, like that document, whether, it's not inerrant, but this is who we are. This is what I feel that God has placed on my heart for this ministry. And it's okay if you disagree with it, like, but this is who we're going to be. And as we're going to trust God in it, but at the same time, like he's placed me in leadership of this ministry. And this is what I believe that he has for us. And when you have that, then you can refer back to it and you say, okay, that's a great idea. Like you said, and you could say yes or no a whole lot easier, but you can also confront if you need to at times and go, this doesn't fall in line with our ministry and I need to address that. But if you don't have that document or that thing you can refer back to, it's a whole lot more difficult, I would assume, in those times.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're hitting the nail on the head there. Because if I'm just kind of off the cuff, like saying yes or no to different things, it can seem like I'm just kind of in charge and it's my way or the highway, right? But if I'm able to like point to something external, right, like this mission, this goal that we have in mind, it's a lot easier to have those conversations.
That's awesome. So yeah, make sure you grab Chris's book and learn exactly what kind of those foundations could be for your ministry, and be sure you're writing up those as well. Chris, I know you're also involved in a ministry called Rooted Ministry. If you want to talk about that, what's that involve, and how are you, I guess, leading in that area as well?
Yeah, yeah. So Root is a great conference ministry. They have a blog, website. Just a really like rich group of fellow youth pastors, youth and family pastors. I think I went to their first conference back in maybe 2015, 2016 in Atlanta. But it's kind of this theologically rich, grace-driven youth ministry organization. So I've written for them a little bit on their website, went to their conferences a few times, but I'm really encouraged by the work that they're doing. So I would just really encourage anybody to check it out. They have a great website with a lot of resources for young youth ministers, people that have been at it for a while, but also parents as well. Kind of over the last few years, they focused a lot on how to like equip parents to do discipleship. Have some podcasts available there too. But yeah, I can't say enough good things about Rooted and their leadership too. Cameron Cole's a great guy. He was the one that wrote the foreword to my book, so he's great as well.
That's really cool. Yeah. I think there's I love that they're doing more work with, like you said, partnering with parents and stuff. I think that's an area of a ministry that I'm constantly growing in as well. I mean, I remember during my internship, I think one of the books that I had to read was Family-Based Youth Ministry by Mark DeVries. And I remember reading it going, I don't want to work with parents. I got into this working because I love teenagers. And yeah, over the years, the 15, 16, 17, whatever years it's been. Yeah, more of my work is more with our leaders and parents. And so, yeah, I'm working with adults more than I am teenagers nowadays. And so any way that I can learn how to do that better is definitely definitely going to be helping my ministry for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably one of the bigger paradigm shifts our students experience while they're here, is trying to capture this vision of doing family ministry, right? Like equipping the parents. And some of them have had that experience, but a lot of them, I think, are like a lot of us, to where, we got into this to minister to teenagers, not,
Yeah.
not adults. So, yeah, it's an interesting shift, but it's biblical, right? Deuteronomy chapter 6, Ephesians 6, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned, yeah, Deuteronomy 6, are you connected with D6? Is that something you're also connected with as well?
Yeah, they are connected with our denomination.
Okay.
So our college is the denomination they ran, and then they're part of our publishing house. I did work for their D6 Family Ministry Journal, which was an academic journal on family ministry. It's on hiatus right now, but I think we're hoping to start back maybe in the next couple of years again.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I love what D6 does. I'm pretty connected with Orange as well, and a lot of different organizations out there that are helping youth workers and kids ministry workers and everything to actually approach the family as a whole and as a unit. And really, if we can not just change teenagers' lives, but change families' lives and see what God can do through that. That's awesome. So you've given a lot of wisdom already in the podcast, but I'd love to just pick your brain just a little bit more. You have an audience of a bunch more youth workers that are out there listening. What are a couple tips that you'd like to share? Maybe it's things that you've picked up along the way or taught in your classes, something like that. Just some free tips out there to toss to all the youth workers that are listening today.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've been learning myself, maybe over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and I feel like I would want to share with the guys and girls that I interact with a lot, is not to give into ministry envy. I think it's really easy. I mean, it's probably easy for anybody that's in ministry, but maybe especially true for youth ministers. Maybe it's just for me in particular. But to do ministry in a way that is honoring the way that God made you, the way that God has gifted your personality, your own spiritual gifting, and so on. I think one of the quick dangers, especially in those first few years of ministry, and even beyond that, is to see the youth ministry down the street or across town, whatnot, and have a little bit of, or even across the U.S., right? We even know of a youth group of a friend of ours or whatnot. And all of a sudden we want to just mimic whatever they're doing, or to kind of copy it because we think that's going to be kind of the quick way to growth. And to try to resist that and instead think more critically about how has God gifted me? How has he formed my personality? And in all that, also honoring the way the scripture talks about ministry as well. And then do ministry according to that. Sometimes I joke that I'm not I'm the world's worst youth minister because I'm just not great with games. and I teach youth ministry, right?
Right.
And I try to do them. But there's a guy that's a youth pastor near here that we're dear friends, and he is a whiz with games. He wrote a book about using games close to when mine came out. And I often say if I try to do youth ministry the way that he does it, it would just it'd be terrible, right? but then vice versa as well. God has just gifted us in different ways. We're in different stages of ministry and so on. So just kind of leaning into God gave me a certain gifting, a way of doing this ministry, a certain personality, even a way of talking about things, and to embrace that rather than try to mimic somebody else.
Yeah, that's so good. I was actually talking with a couple of young youth workers just the other day, and they have this desire to create some community and partnerships with other youth ministries in their community. And they were like, how do you guys do it? And when there is that competition and everything, that's just naturally in us and a lot of in us. And I told them, I was like, I just had It was actually a middle school kid that came to our youth group not too long ago. And he walked in and said something. It was like, oh yeah, the, such and such church. That's one of our, actually another local church. And they're like, their 9 square is so much better than yours. And so, you have that, like, not only are you trying to do that, but a lot of times you have like the kids in your youth group that are naturally trying to compare and everything too. So it's really easy to slip into that. And yeah, I think one of the things, not only like you said, with just keeping that mindset and making sure that, you're focusing on who God has created you to be, but I'd love to add to that to be able to view those other churches in your area or around the country as partners. We're in this together as well. And so if you're like honest, like you said, with who God has created you to be, and we're viewing each other, that we're all in the same team, it's so much easier to stay away from that competition or that comparing or things like that as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things I love about my church is from time to time we'll pray for other churches in our neighborhood. They're and churches that aren't like connected to our denomination, but we know that like they're Bible believing, like gospel proclaiming churches, and so we pray for them, pray that like they that God grows like their ministries, and that they see like the fruit of their labor as well. Yeah, and I think too, befriending those other youth pastors in your area as well, and sometimes that helps because then you realize like the grass isn't necessarily greener, and so. Right. You can share like the struggles and the hardships of ministry with them, and sometimes that helps overcome that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Chris, I know people are going to definitely want to connect with you. They're going to want to pick your brain as well, ask you some follow-up questions, maybe ask you about your school, maybe ask you about your book a little more. So where are the best places for people to find you, find your book, and all those things online?
Yeah. You can find the book on Amazon, probably the easiest place to find it. You can also find it on our welch.edu website. You can purchase there as well. If you want to know more about our youth ministry program here at Welch, you can go on there, and there's some quick links there to find our youth ministry page and find about like courses and different things that we offer regarding that. And then as far as like future projects and things like that, I have a book that I'm editing with a friend about, it's not about youth ministry, but it's about just Christians being faithful in culture. So hopefully it's going to be released maybe at the end of the year here. So we have our eye on that. So I'm looking forward to that as well.
That's cool. That's cool. And as far as your social media, is Twitter the best place to find you, or is there a better place?
Yeah. Twitter's the only place I'm on. So for good or for ill. Yeah. So at @C_Talbot is my Twitter handle, but yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out to me.
Cool. We'll have all those links in the show notes as well, so you guys can just click on those and find Chris online, and read his book. Consider going to school, and you can learn under him in the classroom. But definitely make sure you check out his book and follow him on Twitter. So, Chris, thank you so much for not only, being on the podcast, but all that you're doing to train up the next generation of youth workers. It's so incredibly important. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for staying involved in the local church. I honestly don't know. Like, I thought I had a lot on my plate, but just hearing all that you're doing, I'm like, wow, I don't even think I can comparing, there I go. But yeah, and you're doing so much for the larger kingdom. And so thank you so much for being on today, and may God bless your ministry.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's encouraging. And I had an absolute blast. So thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you all again for listening to this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. Remember that all the links that we talked about in this episode are going to be in the podcast show notes. So make sure you check those out. You can find those probably on most of your podcast apps and services, but also at thestudentministrypodcast.com. There, you're going to find all the links that Chris talked about, where to find his book, including an Amazon affiliate link to be able to help out the Student Ministry Podcast. But also, you're going to find links to his social media and links to both of our sponsors, including G Shades. So make sure you check out G Shades at gshades.org and use the promo code TSMPOD at checkout to receive $5 off your order. And also be sure to check out minhubsync.com/SMP. That's MINHUBSYN smc.com/SMP, and you can support the Student Ministry Podcast by checking out that link and signing up for their service. Thank you so much for being here once again. I can't wait until we're back again for another episode. It's going to be great. But until that time, be sure to share this. Be sure to leave us a positive review. It's a huge help to the podcast, honestly. And also, if you know someone that we should be talking to, be sure to let us know. Connect with us on social media. Connect with me on social media. I'm at Steve Cullum on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me there as well. All those links, again, are going to be in the show notes, so check those out. But until we talk again next time, may God bless your ministry.